Oh, that's clean. We got all the mines too. Oh my. That's illegal in some countries, bro.
Big PTR patch just went live tonight. First up, Bastion self-repair has changed, and now self-repair no longer consumes resource while Bastion is at full health. Sounds good, lets you spam it without having to manage it after you actually lost HP, but here comes the nerf. Bastion now correctly initiates 0.25 seconds of recovery time when canceling self-repair with primary fire. I think you'd have to say this overall is a nerf because the small buff is really just a quality of life fix that you could have managed anyway if you only used the ability when you took damage. Next up, Symetra's primary fire beam width has been lowered from 0.3 meters to 0.15. That's a huge nerf, but keep in mind that she got a huge buff with the way the tick rates had changed on the live version of the game that's allowing Sim and Zarya to be far more forgiving when you're not hitting the target perfectly that you're aiming at. Also as well, a bit of a double whammy. Her beam DPS has now been reverted down a bit. It used to be 65, 130, and 195 at level 3 charge, now goes down to 60, 120, and 180. Still, damage per second, pretty darn high, and unfortunately for Sim, the second that she becomes kind of meta, they tune her right back down. It's kind of in a tricky spot because I feel like although she's pretty insane on the live version of the game, she's still pretty counterable with a ton of different stuff, so we'll have to see how this shakes out for the character. Next up, Zarya also gets the beam change. This one's slightly different. The beam width no longer scales with energy. It used to go from 0.1 to 0.2 meters. Now it's always 0.15, so that does mean it's a small buff at lower energy levels, but it's not going to get up to that really fat beam when you're at high charge. But still, kind of a compromise considering the fact that the beam tick rate damage increased her DPS so much against targets that are hard to hit that it'll take some testing to see if this really matters or not. Also, they put her max beam DPS down. It used to be 190, now it's going to cap out at 170. What isn't clear to me, though, is what exactly they changed here. Because they only refer to the max amount, I'm not sure if that means the rest of the values are the same somehow, or if all the values are lower. This is a really important distinction that we'll have to find out, because the way current live version of Zarya works is that her beam does 95 damage per second, and then it's multiplied times 1% for every point of energy, which obviously scales up with the more energy you have, up to a modifier of times 2, because it's 100% extra damage, turning that 95 DPS to 190 DPS. Which one of these numbers is changing, I'm not exactly sure, but if my assumption is correct, this means that all of her damage throughout the other levels of charge will be decreased as well, unless they just completely changed the way the math works on it, but they didn't explain, so we don't know. Next up, changes to Sigma. Hypersphere's explosion damage reduced from 35 to 30. Experimental Barrier added a toggle option for deploying Sigma's Experimental Barrier. A lot of people wanted that. That's good. Accretion explosion damage increased from 50 to 60, and Gravitic Flux intro cast time increased from 0.4 to 0.6 seconds. Okay, this is a whole lot of stuff at once. So the explosion damage being lowered, I think you will find a bit significant because currently right now, Sigma really easily farms up gold damage, most damage on the team, just lobbing projectiles at the enemy, farming the tanks, and hitting multiple targets with the big AoE damage. Now it's important to note that before, each orb used to do 60 damage direct, including the splash in there. Now each will do 55. It gets a little bit of that damage back though, with Accretion Rock increasing its damage by 10, so it still pans out that he's going to be able to get a 200 damage burst combo with a rock and 2 directs, because essentially what they did is remove 5 damage each away from each hypersphere and put it into the Accretion Rock. Overall, a bit of a nerf, but doesn't change his playstyle in duels, will just lower how much spam damage you deal, but remember, that's pretty important to his ability to charge up Gravitic Flux as well. Splashing into a big team clump, you'll now do a percentage less. Moving on to the bug fixes now. Some of these were significant to the interactions of the character, so we thought we would add them in. Ashe improved the ability for Bob to get through doorways and more consistently make it to where he was launched towards. Nice, Bob gets a buff. Next up, Deva had a bug that allowed her mech to block Earth Shatter during the destruction animation. That's now fixed. Arisa, I know you tank players have experienced this one, they fixed a bug that caused players to be thrown further than intended when escaping the pull effect of Arisa's halt. This is specifically when you use Fortify after being halted. On the live version of the game, you would sort of slingshot your way out of the halt. If you timed it right, it'll be interesting to see what the new interaction is like. I assume the momentum is just slowed down a bit, so you probably get launched a bit, just not to the heavens. Sigma got a bunch of bug fixes as well. His animations were kind of wonky and didn't work right after being frozen. Other visual bugs as well. And Zenyatta had a bug that is now fixed that used to prevent him from using Teleporter while using Transcendence. Quite a few significant changes in this patch. Let me know your thoughts on them in the comment section down below. Gonna need to do some serious testing on what I think about these beam changes. I feel better now that the size of them is smaller, though I have been enjoying racking up a lot of free kills playing Zarya without perfect aim. So I guess I have to give that back now. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it with a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link in the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.